What if the worst moment of your morning became the best thing that ever happened to you? Maribel Quinn was running late, distracted, and completely unprepared for the man she was about to crash into. Literally. One collision. One conversation in the rain. One smile that changed everything. Ronan Calder had spent a decade building an empire of control. Until the moment he realized that losing control might be exactly what he needed. This is a story about desire that arrives unexpectedly, and a choice to stay that requires everything. Raw, real, unforgettable. Hi there, beautiful viewer. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment. And if this story resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support truly makes all the difference. Let's experience this emotional journey together. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday morning, turning the parking lot outside the Evanston Physical Therapy Center into a slick maze of puddles and half-painted lines. Maribel Quinn was already running late. Not disastrously late, but enough that she could feel the pressure building behind her temples as she fumbled with her coffee cup, her phone, and the keys that kept slipping between her fingers. She'd been awake since 5:30, dealing with a supplier who'd somehow sent the wrong order of resistance bands for the third time in 2 weeks. Her morning had been a blur of terse emails, rescheduled patient appointments, and a brief but pointed conversation with Dr. Patel about why they couldn't just make it work with equipment that wasn't up to standard. Maribel was good at her job, better than good. She kept the clinic running like clockwork, anticipated problems before they became crises, and managed to do it all without the kind of drama that seemed to follow other coordinators she'd known. At 30, she'd learned to trust her instincts, speak her mind, and carry herself with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need validation. But right now, she just needed to get to the bank before it closed for lunch. She slid into her Honda Civic, tossed her bag onto the passenger seat, and immediately answered the call coming through on speaker. It was Jenny from radiology, asking about a referral that should have been processed yesterday. "I sent it twice," Maribel said, reversing out of her spot with practiced efficiency. "Check your spam folder. If it's not there, I'll resend it in 10 minutes. She ended the call, shifted into drive, and pulled forward without fully checking her mirrors. The impact was gentle, almost polite. A soft crunch of metal meeting metal, followed by absolute silence. Maribel's heart dropped into her stomach. She closed her eyes, took a breath that tasted like embarrassment and bad timing, and slowly looked up into her rearview mirror. Behind her sat a black Audi sedan, sleek, understated, and probably worth more than she made in 6 months. The kind of car that didn't belong in a medical center parking lot at 9:15 on a Thursday morning. She put the car in park, grabbed her phone, and stepped out into the rain. The man who emerged from the Audi was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a charcoal suit that somehow looked perfect despite the weather. His dark hair was slightly damp, his jaw set in an expression that could have been annoyance or resignation. Maribel couldn't quite tell. He walked toward her with measured steps, hands in his pockets, and stopped a few feet away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Maribel broke first because silence had never been her style. "So," she said, crossing her arms and tilting her head slightly, "does this count as a modern meet-cute, or am I just having the worst morning of my week?" The man blinked. Once, twice, and then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It was genuine, sudden, like something had cracked open in him that he hadn't expected to show. "If it counts," he said, his voice low and surprisingly warm. "I promise I'll do better next time." Maribel felt something shift in her chest, a flicker of amusement, maybe curiosity. She studied him for a second longer than necessary. Sharp features, serious eyes that held a hint of exhaustion beneath the surface, and a presence that felt deliberate, like every movement, every word, was carefully chosen. "Next time?" she asked, one eyebrow lifting. "You planning on rear-ending me again?" "Depends," he replied, stepping closer to inspect the damage. "Are you planning on reversing without looking?" She laughed, a short, surprised sound that made him glance up. "Touché," she admitted, though in my defense I was multitasking. "Dangerous habit," says the guy who was probably on a conference call. He didn't deny it. Instead, he crouched down to examine the bumpers. The damage was minimal. A small dent on her car, a barely noticeable scrape on his. Nothing that required anything more than an insurance claim and maybe some touch-up paint. "I'm Ronan," he said, standing and extending a hand. "Maribel." His grip was firm, warm despite the rain. She noticed he didn't let go immediately, not in a way that felt inappropriate, but in a way that felt intentional. "I'll cover the repairs," he said. "No need to involve insurance if you don't want to." Maribel considered it. The practical part of her brain knew she should go through proper channels. But there was something about the way he said it. Straightforward, no negotiation, just a quiet assumption of responsibility that made her pause. "Let's at least exchange information," she said, "in case one of us changes our mind." He nodded, pulling out his phone. They traded numbers in the rain, standing between their cars like two people who'd stumbled into a scene neither of them had rehearsed. "You work here?" Ronan asked, glancing toward the clinic. "Coordinator," Maribel replied. "I keep things from falling apart. Mostly successfully." "Mostly?" "Well, I did just back into an Audi, so my track record's taken a hit today." He almost smiled again. She caught the edge of it before he turned back toward his car. "I should let you get back," he said. "I'm sure you're busy." "Perpetually," she agreed. But she didn't move. Neither did he. The rain continued to fall, softer now, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of traffic on the main road. The moment stretched, just slightly, into something that felt less like an accident report and more like something else. "Ronan," she said, before she could think better of it. "Next time you plan on doing better? Maybe skip the car crash part?" His eyes met hers, and this time the smile reached them. "Noted," he said. He got back into his car, and Maribel watched him drive away with a strange sense that the morning had just become significantly more interesting than she'd anticipated. By the time she made it inside, her clothes were damp and her coffee was cold, but somehow she didn't mind as much as she should have. Jenny caught her in the hallway holding a tablet and wearing the kind of expression that meant something had gone wrong. "The MRI scheduler just called," she started. "They double-booked Mrs. Kowalski's appointment and—" "I'll fix it," Maribel said, already pulling out her phone. "Give me 5 minutes." She handled it in 3. The rest of the morning passed in the usual controlled chaos. Insurance disputes, equipment deliveries, a minor crisis involving a patient who'd brought their emotional support peacock into the waiting room. Maribel navigated it all with the same calm efficiency she always did, but her mind kept drifting back to the parking lot, to the way Ronan had looked at her in the rain, to the smile that didn't quite fit the rest of him. During lunch, her coworker Lisa cornered her in the break room with a knowing look. "So," Lisa said, pouring herself coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner, "I saw you in the parking lot this morning. You saw me have a minor collision, you mean? I saw you talking to a man in a very expensive suit who looked at you like you'd just said something fascinating." Maribel rolled her eyes, but she felt warmth creep up her neck. "It was an accident. We exchanged information. End of story." "Mm-hmm." Lisa leaned against the counter, grinning. "And when he comes back to check on the damage, I'm sure it'll still be just about the cars. He's not coming back. Want to bet?" Maribel didn't answer, because the truth was, she'd already wondered the same thing. That night, as she sat in her apartment with takeout Thai food and a documentary she wasn't really watching, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message. "Made it home without any additional collisions. Hope your day improved from there. R." Maribel stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, against every practical instinct she had, she smiled and typed back. "Barely, but I'll survive. Try not to hit anyone else this week." His response came faster than she expected. "No promises, but I'll do my best." She set the phone down, her heart beating just slightly faster than it should. Outside, the rain had stopped and the city lights reflected off the wet streets below her window. Something had started today. She didn't know what, exactly, but she was curious enough to find out. The messages started innocently enough. Practical updates about the insurance claim, a photo of the repair estimate, a question about whether she preferred morning or afternoon appointments at the body shop. But somewhere between Tuesday and Friday, the conversations began to drift. Ronan asked about her day. Not in the obligatory way people did when they were making small talk, but like he actually wanted to know. Maribel found herself telling him about the peacock incident, about Mrs. Kowalski's habit of bringing homemade pierogi to her appointments, about the absurd bureaucracy of medical supply chains. He responded with stories of his own, logistics nightmares, distribution delays, the particular brand of chaos that came with managing a company that moved products across 6 states. His texts were precise, measured, but every now and then something would slip through. A dry observation, a perfectly timed joke, a question that suggested he'd been paying closer attention than necessary. "Do you always solve problems in 3 minutes, or was that just to impress the peacock?" Maribel had laughed out loud in the middle of a staff meeting, earning a curious look from Dr. Patel. The peacock was unimpressed. But I have a reputation to maintain. Noted. I'll try not to present you with any birds when we meet again. When, not if, she'd noticed. The following Monday, Ronan appeared at the clinic. Maribel was at the front desk, mediating a scheduling conflict between two patients who both insisted they'd been promised the same time slot. She had her professional smile in place, her voice calm and firm, when she saw him walk through the glass doors. He wore a navy suit this time, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd run his hand through it recently. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm and stopped just inside the entrance, scanning the waiting room until his eyes found hers. The look lasted maybe 3 seconds, but Maribel felt it in her chest, in the sudden awareness of her own heartbeat. She finished with the patients, efficiently, diplomatically, and walked over to where he stood. "Ronan," she said, keeping her voice neutral despite the way her pulse had quickened. "Everything okay with the claim?" "Everything's fine," he replied. His voice was lower than she remembered, or maybe it was just the acoustics of the waiting room. "I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by and make sure you got the final paperwork. You could have emailed it." "I could have." The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with something neither of them was saying out loud. Lisa appeared from the back hallway, took one look at the two of them, and smiled in a way that made Maribel want to disappear. "Maribel," she said sweetly, "I can cover the desk if you need a minute." Maribel shot her a look that promised retribution later, but nodded. She gestured toward the small consultation room near the entrance, a space usually reserved for insurance discussions and payment plans. Ronan followed her inside. She closed the door. The room suddenly felt smaller than it was. "So," Maribel said, leaning against the desk and crossing her arms, "you were in the area." "I was." "This is 20 minutes out of your way. I Googled your office." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You Googled me." "I Googled your company," she corrected, though her cheeks warmed. "Professional curiosity." "And what did you find?" "That you're very good at what you do. That you've built something impressive. That you probably don't have a lot of free time to drive across town for paperwork you could have scanned." Ronan was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of the space between them. "Maybe 6 feet, maybe less." "You're right," he said finally. "I don't have a lot of free time. So why are you here?" He took a step closer. Not enough to crowd her, but enough that she caught the faint scent of his cologne. Something clean and understated, like cedar and rain. "Because I've been trying to stop thinking about you for a week," he said, his voice steady but quieter now. "And I'm failing." Maribel's breath caught. She'd expected deflection, maybe charm, not honesty that direct. "Ronan, I know," he interrupted gently. "I know this isn't how these things usually work. I know I'm probably crossing a line just by saying it, but I'm not very good at pretending." She believed him. Everything about him suggested a man who dealt in facts, in precision, in control. This, whatever this was, clearly didn't fit into his usual framework. "What exactly are you not pretending about?" she asked, proud of how level her voice remained. His eyes held hers. "That I've been looking for excuses to see you again. That every time my phone vibrates, I hope it's you. That I sat in my car for 10 minutes before coming in here, trying to convince myself this was a terrible idea. And yet here you are. Here I am." The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Maribel knew she should say something practical, something that acknowledged the complications, the age difference, the different worlds they occupied, the fact that they barely knew each other. Instead, she asked, "Did you convince yourself?" "No," Ronan admitted. "I didn't." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the desk behind her. A reminder about a staff meeting in 5 minutes. Reality reasserted itself. Ronan noticed her glance at the screen, and something shifted in his expression. Not disappointment exactly, but resignation. "You need to get back," he said. "I do." But neither of them moved. "Maribel," he said, and the way he said her name felt like a question and a statement at once. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know." She nodded slowly, processing the weight of what he'd just laid out in a conversation room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old magazines. "I appreciate the honesty," she said, "even if it's terrifying." A flicker of something, relief maybe, crossed his face. "It is terrifying." "Good," she replied, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Because if you weren't at least a little scared, I'd think you weren't paying attention. He smiled then, a real one, and it transformed his entire face. I'm paying attention, he said quietly. The meeting reminder buzzed again. Maribel exhaled, pushed off the desk, and reached for the door handle. I should go, she said. I know. She paused, hand on the door, and looked back at him. Ronan? Yeah? Text me when you get back to your office, so I know you didn't cause any more accidents on the way. His expression softened. I will. She left him there, walked back to the front desk with her heart beating too fast, and somehow made it through the staff meeting without anyone noticing she was somewhere else entirely. That evening, Maribel sat across from her sister Grace in a small Italian restaurant they'd been going to since college. Grace was 2 years older, a high school English teacher with a talent for reading between lines, both on the page and in life. You've checked your phone 4 times since we sat down, Grace observed, twirling pasta onto her fork. So either there's a work crisis, or there's a man. Maribel set her phone face down on the table, a gesture that fooled neither of them. There's no crisis, she said carefully. Grace's eyebrows rose. Oh, this is going to be good. Maribel told her about the accident, about Ronan's visit to the clinic, about the conversation that had left her feeling simultaneously exhilarated and unsteady. She left out some of the details, the way he'd looked at her, the timbre of his voice when he said he'd been trying not to think about her. But Grace filled in the blanks anyway. So he's successful, honest, and clearly interested, Grace summarized. What's the problem? I don't know if there is one, Maribel admitted. That's what scares me. Explain. Maribel hesitated, trying to put the nebulous feeling into words. He's deliberate about everything. The way he moves, the way he talks. Like he's always 3 steps ahead, always in control. And then he shows up at my work and tells me he can't stop thinking about me. And suddenly, none of that control seems to matter. And that bothers you? It doesn't bother me. It just, she paused. It feels like standing at the edge of something. Like if I step forward, everything changes. Grace set down her fork, her expression gentler now. Maribel, you're one of the most self-assured people I know. You don't need my permission or my warning. But I will say this. Men like that, men who have that much control and then choose to lose it, they don't do it lightly. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're both trying to talk yourselves out of something that's already happening. Maribel's phone buzzed. She flipped it over before she could stop herself. Made it back. No incidents to report, though I did spend the entire drive thinking about what you said. Grace leaned over, read the message, and smiled knowingly. Yeah, she said. That's definitely already happening. Later that night, Maribel stood at her apartment window, looking out at the city lights and typing a response she'd rewritten 3 times. And what conclusion did you come to? His reply came almost immediately. That you're right. I should be scared, but I'm not sure that's going to stop me. She stared at the words, feeling something settle in her chest. Not quite certainty, but close. Good, she typed back, because I'm not sure I want you to stop. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. Dinner, this weekend, somewhere that doesn't involve insurance paperwork or clinic waiting rooms. Say yes. Maribel closed her eyes, took a breath, and made a choice. Yes. Saturday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation Maribel hadn't felt in years. She changed outfits 3 times, settling finally on a deep emerald dress that was elegant without trying too hard, paired with ankle boots and a leather jacket that kept the look grounded. She left her hair down, applied minimal makeup, and told herself this was just dinner. Just dinner with a man who'd admitted he couldn't stop thinking about her. Just dinner that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if she'd fall or fly. Ronan picked her up at 7. He'd offered to meet her at the restaurant, but something in his tone, a quiet insistence, made her say yes to him coming to her apartment building instead. When she stepped outside, he was leaning against his car, hands in the pockets of dark slacks, wearing a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look darker than she remembered. He straightened when he saw her, and for a moment, he just looked. Hi, she said, suddenly aware of how far she'd come from the woman who'd backed into his car 3 weeks ago. Hi, he replied, his voice carrying a warmth that felt almost tangible. You look... He trailed off, and she watched him struggle for a word that wouldn't sound rehearsed. Beautiful, he finished simply. You look beautiful. Thank you, Maribel said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You clean up pretty well yourself," he smiled, that rare, genuine smile that seemed to cost him something, and opened the passenger door for her. The restaurant was in downtown Chicago, tucked away on a side street most tourists never found. It was intimate without being pretentious. Exposed brick walls, soft lighting from Edison bulbs, small tables that encouraged conversation rather than performance. The hostess led them to a corner booth, and Ronan let Maribel slide in first before settling across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched, close enough that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. "How did you find this place?" she asked, glancing around at the understated elegance. "A colleague recommended it years ago," Ronan said. "I've been here a few times for business dinners, but this is the first time I've wanted to be here." The honesty in that statement settled between them like a stone dropped into still water. They ordered wine, a red she'd never heard of but trusted his recommendation on, and fell into conversation that felt easier than it should have. He asked about her work, really asked, wanting to know what drew her to healthcare administration, what frustrated her about it, what kept her coming back day after day. "I like solving problems," Maribel said, turning her wine glass between her fingers. "I like taking chaos and finding the pattern in it, making systems work better. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary and I'm good at it." "You are," Ronan agreed. "I could tell that the first day. The way you handled everything, the accident, the awkwardness, even Lisa's knowing looks." He paused. "You don't apologize for taking up space. Should I?" "God, no." His gaze held hers. "It's one of the things I noticed immediately. You're present, fully yourself. It's rare." Maribel felt something tighten in her chest. "And you? What's rare about you, Ronan Calder?" He considered the question seriously, like he did most things. "I'm not sure rare is the right word," he said eventually, "but I've spent most of my adult life building something that required absolute focus. Creating systems, managing logistics, anticipating failure points. It's made me disciplined, maybe too disciplined. How so? I don't let things distract me. I don't make impulsive decisions. I plan, I calculate, I maintain control." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "Until you." The air between them shifted, charged with something electric. "I'm a distraction?" Maribel asked softly. "You're more than that." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the ambient noise around them. "You're the first thing in a decade that's made me question whether control is actually what I want." Their food arrived, perfectly timed to break the intensity of the moment, though neither of them seemed particularly interested in eating. Maribel took a bite of her pasta, more out of courtesy than hunger, aware that Ronan was watching her with an attention that felt almost physical. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. That day at the clinic, when you showed up, you said you'd been trying not to think about me. Why did you stop trying?" Ronan set down his fork, leaned back slightly, and seemed to measure his words. "Because I realized that trying not to think about you was taking more energy than just admitting I wanted to," he said. "And because every time we texted, every time I saw your name on my phone, I felt something I haven't felt in years, maybe ever." "What's that?" "Anticipation. Not for the next deal or the next quarter's numbers, but just anticipation for a conversation, for hearing what you'd say, for the way you make me smile without even trying." Maribel's heart was beating too fast. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips wrapped around the stem of her wine glass. "Ronan," she said carefully, "I need you to understand something. Okay, I don't do this. I don't meet someone and feel like the ground is shifting under my feet. I'm practical. I plan things. I think things through." She took a breath. "But with you, I feel like I'm making decisions before my brain catches up. And that scares me." "It scares me too," he admitted. "I've built an entire life on predictability, on knowing the variables. You're not a variable I can predict. Is that a problem?" "I don't know yet." His eyes searched hers. "But I'm starting to think it might be the best problem I've ever had." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and risk in equal measure. Maribel felt herself leaning forward without deciding to, drawn by gravity or instinct or something she didn't have a name for. Ronan mirrored the movement, closing the space between them until the table seemed less like a barrier and more like an arbitrary line they were both considering crossing. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said quietly. "I'm thinking," Maribel replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "that you're dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "Dangerous because you make me want to stop being careful. Because every time you look at me like that, I forget why I should be cautious. Like what? Like you're memorizing something, like you see more than what's in front of you. Ronan's hand moved across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers found hers, warm and steady. I do see more, he said. I see someone who's brilliant and sharp and doesn't need anyone but chose to say yes anyway. I see someone who makes me want to be less disciplined and more alive. Maribel's breath caught. The touch of his hand against hers felt disproportionately significant. Skin on skin, deliberate contact. A choice made visible. I'm not used to this, she admitted. To what? To someone seeing me and not trying to change what they find. Something in Ronan's expression softened. I don't want to change anything about you, Maribel. I just want to know you. Really know you. The weight of that statement settled over her like a blanket, comforting and terrifying at once. They stayed like that for a moment longer, hands touching across the table, the restaurant fading into background noise. Then Ronan's thumb traced a gentle line across her knuckles, and she felt it everywhere. I should probably let you eat, he said, though he didn't pull his hand away. Probably, she agreed, not moving either. When they finally did separate, it felt like a loss. After dinner, they walked. The Chicago night was cool, but not cold. The streets alive with weekend energy. Ronan offered his arm, and Maribel took it, aware of the solid warmth of him beside her. They talked about small things, favorite books, worst jobs, the peculiar comfort of rainy Sundays. But underneath every word was the current of what they'd said at dinner, the admissions that had shifted something fundamental between them. Eventually, they found themselves on a pedestrian bridge overlooking the river, the city lights reflecting off the dark water below. Maribel leaned against the railing and Ronan stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Can I tell you something? She asked, looking out at the skyline rather than at him. Always. I'm terrified I'm going to disappoint you, that you've built up some idea of who I am and the reality won't match. Ronan was quiet for a moment. Then he turned, his body angling toward hers. Maribel, look at me. She did. You're not an idea, he said, his voice firm but gentle. You're real, and messy, and complicated, and that's exactly what I want. Not some perfect version, just you. She searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation, and found none. You say that now, she said, trying to keep her tone light even as emotion tightened her throat. I'll say it tomorrow too, and the day after that. He reached up, his hand hovering near her face before making contact, fingers tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so tender, it made her chest ache. I'm not going anywhere, Maribel. Not unless you tell me to. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something between them solidified, not quite a promise but an understanding, a mutual recognition that whatever this was, it mattered. I don't want you to go anywhere, she whispered. Ronan's hand moved from her hair to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about control and discipline. Then I won't, he said. The space between them disappeared slowly. Their foreheads touched first, breath mingling in the cool night air. Maribel's eyes closed, her hands finding the front of his sweater, grounding herself in the physical reality of him. When their lips finally met, it was soft, careful, a question and an answer at once. Ronan kissed her like she was something precious, something worth the wait. His hand cradled her face, the other moving to the small of her back, drawing her closer without demanding more than she wanted to give. Maribel felt herself melt into it, into him, letting go of the careful control she'd maintained all evening. The kiss deepened gradually, naturally, until she couldn't tell where her breath ended and his began. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke immediately. Ronan rested his forehead against hers again, his breathing slightly uneven, his eyes still closed. That was... he started. Yeah, she agreed. He smiled against her hair. I wasn't going to make it through this evening without kissing you. I would have been disappointed if you had. They stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other in the Chicago night, neither wanting to break the spell. Eventually, Ronan drove her home. At her door, he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Good night, Maribel, he said, his voice rough. Good night. She watched him walk back to his car, watched him turn to look at her one more time before driving away. Inside her apartment, Maribel leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips, her heart still racing. Everything had changed tonight, and she wasn't scared anymore. The weeks that followed the kiss felt like learning a new language, one made of glances across crowded rooms, stolen moments between obligations, and the kind of intimacy that built itself slowly, deliberately, like something worth protecting. Ronan called her the morning after their dinner. Not texted, called. His voice was rough with what she suspected was lingering sleeplessness, and the first thing he said was, "I wanted to hear your voice." Maribel had been making coffee in her kitchen, still wearing the t-shirt she'd slept in, her hair a mess. But hearing him say that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You're awake early," she said, smiling into the phone. "I haven't really slept," he admitted. "Couldn't stop thinking about last night. Good thoughts, I hope." "The best." There was a pause, the sound of movement on his end. "Maribel, I want to see you again. Soon. Is that too much?" "No," she said without hesitation. "It's not too much." They made plans for Tuesday, then Thursday, then the following weekend. What started as dates became something more organic. Ronan showing up at the clinic during her lunch break with sandwiches from the deli she'd mentioned liking. Maribel driving to his office building after work, just to sit in his car and talk, while the city rushed past them. He learned that she took her coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar, that she had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was thinking hard about something, that she could turn any conversation into an opportunity for dry humor that made him laugh more than he had in years. She learned that beneath the composed exterior, Ronan was remarkably thoughtful, remembering small details she'd mentioned in passing, asking follow-up questions days later about problems she'd been dealing with at work. She learned that his control wasn't coldness but rather a carefully maintained dam holding back something much deeper. And she learned that when he looked at her, really looked at her, she felt seen in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. But not everything was seamless. The first real complication came 3 weeks into whatever they were building. Maribel was at her desk, reviewing supply orders, when her phone buzzed with a text from Ronan. "Something came up. I have to cancel tonight, I'm sorry." She stared at the message, feeling a twist of disappointment she hadn't expected. They'd planned dinner at her apartment, something simple, intimate, just the two of them without the performance of being in public. "Everything okay?" she typed back. "Client emergency. Distribution center in Milwaukee shut down unexpectedly. I need to drive up there tonight. How long will you be gone?" "Not sure yet. Could be a few days." Maribel set her phone down, telling herself it was fine. He had a business to run. Emergencies happened. This was the reality of dating someone whose entire company depended on solving problems in real time. But the disappointment lingered. Lisa noticed immediately. She always did. "What's wrong?" she asked, appearing at Maribel's desk with a cup of terrible break-room coffee. "Nothing," Maribel said automatically. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." Lisa perched on the edge of the desk. "Spill," Maribel sighed. "Ronan had to cancel tonight. Work thing." "Ah." Lisa's expression softened. "First cancellation?" "Yeah. And you're wondering if it's going to be a pattern." Maribel looked up sharply. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I've seen this before. Successful guy, demanding job, good intentions but limited time." Lisa paused. "But here's the thing. The question isn't whether he's going to be busy. He will be. The question is whether he makes you a priority when it matters. And how do I know that? You watch what he does next." What Ronan did next surprised her. He called at midnight. Maribel was already in bed, reading a book she wasn't really absorbing, when her phone lit up with his name. "Hi," she answered, her voice softer than she intended. "Hi." He sounded exhausted. "I know it's late, I needed to hear your voice before I tried to sleep." Something in Maribel's chest loosened. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. The entire refrigeration system failed. We're looking at thousands of dollars in spoiled inventory if we can't get it fixed by morning." He exhaled heavily. "I'm sorry about tonight. Ronan, you don't have to apologize for doing your job. I know. But I wanted to be there. I was looking forward to it." "Me too." There was a pause, filled with the ambient noise of wherever he was. A hotel room maybe, or a temporary office. "Maribel," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I don't want this to be a pattern. I don't want to be the guy who's always canceling, always choosing work over you." "Then don't be," she said simply. "It's not that easy." "It is, actually. You just have to decide what matters more." She heard him take a breath like he was about to argue, but then he stopped. "You're right," he said finally. "You're absolutely right." They talked for another 20 minutes. About nothing important, just the sound of each other's voices bridging the distance between them. When they finally hung up, Maribel felt steadier than she had all evening. Ronan came back to Evanston 2 days later. He showed up at the clinic unannounced, looking rumpled in a way she'd never seen before. His shirt wrinkled, his tie loose, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. But his eyes found hers the moment he walked through the door, and something in them made her forget about the stack of paperwork in front of her. "Can you take a break?" he asked when she met him in the waiting room. "Ronan, you look like you haven't slept in." "I haven't, not really. But I drove back early because I needed to see you." Maribel glanced at Lisa, who was already waving her away with a knowing smile, and led Ronan to the consultation room they'd first talked in weeks ago. The moment the door closed, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a romantic embrace. Not exactly. It was grounding, solid, like he needed the physical confirmation that she was real, and there, and still his to hold. Maribel wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath the wrinkled fabric of his shirt. "I made a decision," he said into her hair. "What decision?" "I promoted my operations manager, gave her more authority to handle emergencies without me. I'm restructuring how I manage crisis situations." He pulled back slightly to look at her. "I can't promise I'll never have to cancel again, but I can promise I won't let work consume everything. Not anymore." Maribel studied his face, seeing the sincerity there, the determination. "Ronan, I don't want you to change your life for me." "I'm not," he interrupted gently. "I'm changing it for me. Because I realized something in Milwaukee at 3 a.m, sitting in a freezing warehouse trying to solve a problem that had 15 other people who could have solved it just as well." "What did you realize?" "That I've been using work as an excuse not to need anyone, not to want anything beyond the next quarter's numbers." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "And then you backed into my car and turned my entire world sideways." "I did not back into you," she protested weakly. He smiled, tired but genuine. "You absolutely did, and I'm glad you did." Maribel felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "You're exhausted. You should be at home sleeping, not standing in my clinic making grand declarations." "Grand declarations are better when you mean them," he said. "And I mean this, Maribel. I want to build something with you, something real, and I'm willing to do the work to make that happen." She stood on her toes and kissed him, soft, brief, but filled with everything she couldn't quite put into words yet. "Go home," she said when they separated. "Sleep, and then come back tonight and let me make you dinner. You're not disappointed I ruined our original plans?" "Ronan," she looked at him steadily, "you just reorganized your entire company structure because you didn't want to miss another dinner with me. I'm the opposite of disappointed." That evening, Maribel cooked pasta in her small kitchen while Ronan sat at her counter, showered and rested but still wearing the contented exhaustion of someone who'd made a hard decision and felt good about it. He told her about Milwaukee, about the panic and the problem-solving and the moment he'd realized he was choosing to be there when he wanted to be here. She told him about her day, about Mrs. Kowalski bringing pierogi again, about the new hire who kept scheduling patients in 15-minute increments when everyone knew physical therapy sessions ran at least 45. It was domestic, simple, and somehow more intimate than any of the elaborate dates they could have planned. After dinner, they moved to her couch. Maribel tucked herself against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. While some documentary about ocean currents played on the television, neither of them was watching. "This is nice," Ronan said quietly, his arm around her shoulders, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. "Just nice?" she teased. "Perfect," he corrected. "This is perfect." Maribel tilted her head up to look at him. In the soft light from the television, he looked younger, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always. Are you scared? About this? About us?" Ronan considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "I'm scared of messing it up," he admitted. "I'm scared of falling back into old patterns. I'm scared that I won't be good enough at this, at being present, at being what you need." He looked down at her. "But I'm more scared of not trying." Maribel shifted, turning to face him more fully. "You don't have to be perfect, Ronan. You just have to be honest, and present, and willing to figure it out as we go." "I can do that," he said, then quieter. "I want to do that." She kissed him then, deeper than before, with less hesitation. His hand moved to her waist, drawing her closer, and she felt the careful control he always maintained start to slip, not breaking, but bending, making room for something messier and more real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," Maribel whispered. "Tonight? Tonight." He searched her eyes, making sure she meant it, that she understood what she was asking. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." What followed wasn't rushed. There was no urgency, no desperate fumbling, just the slow, deliberate exploration of two people who decided they were worth the risk. Later, tangled together in her bed with the city lights filtering through her curtains, Ronan traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I'm falling for you," he said into the darkness. In case that wasn't obvious, Maribel smiled against his chest. "It was obvious, but I liked hearing it anyway." "And you?" She lifted her head to meet his eyes. "I'm already there, Ronan. I think I have been since you showed up at my clinic pretending it was about insurance paperwork." He kissed her forehead, her temple, the corner of her mouth. "Best accident I ever had," he murmured. "Second best," she corrected. "The best one is still happening." And in that moment, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty of what they were building, both of them knew she was right. 3 months into their relationship, Maribel woke up to find Ronan already awake beside her, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That's creepy," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "That's love," he corrected, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She opened one eye fully, studying him in the early morning light filtering through her bedroom curtains. He looked relaxed in a way that would have seemed impossible when they first met. His hair messy, his face unguarded, wearing nothing but boxer briefs, and the kind of contentment that came from knowing exactly where he belonged. "Love?" she repeated, more awake now. "Love," he confirmed, no hesitation in his voice. "I'm in love with you, Maribel. Have been for a while. Just thought you should know." She felt her heart expand in her chest, a sensation both wonderful and terrifying. "You're telling me this before I've even had coffee?" "I'm telling you this because I can't not tell you anymore." He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." But Maribel caught his face between her hands, pulling him back to look at her properly. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both enormous and perfectly simple. "And I think I have since you showed up at my clinic looking exhausted and determined to reorganize your entire life." Ronan's smile was brilliant, unguarded in a way that made her fall even harder. "So we're doing this?" he asked. "We're already doing it," she replied. "We have been for months." "No, I mean really doing this. Building something permanent. Making plans that aren't just about next week or next month." Maribel felt something settle in her chest. Certainty, solid, and unshakable. "Yeah," she said, "we're really doing this." The reality of building something permanent revealed itself in small, unexpected ways. Ronan started keeping a toothbrush at her apartment, then a change of clothes. Then gradually, without either of them explicitly discussing it, half his closet seemed to migrate into her bedroom. Maribel found herself with a key to his house, the modern, functional space in the suburbs that he'd bought for its practicality, but that now felt warmer with her presence in it. She brought plants that he'd never thought to buy, rearranged his kitchen to make actual sense, and slowly transformed the guest room into a home office where she could work when she stayed over. They learned each other's rhythms. Maribel discovered that Ronan was a morning person who woke at 6 regardless of what time he'd gone to bed, that he liked to work out before breakfast, and that he was surprisingly good at cooking when he actually made time for it. Ronan learned that Maribel needed at least 20 minutes of silence before she was ready to have a real conversation in the morning, that she stress-baked when work got overwhelming, and that she had a weakness for terrible reality TV that she watched with the kind of focused attention most people reserved for documentaries. They had their first real fight 6 weeks after the "I love you." It started small, Ronan making a decision about weekend plans without consulting her first. Assuming she'd be free because she usually was, Maribel pushed back, pointing out that assumption wasn't the same as communication. He got defensive, she got quiet, and suddenly they were in the middle of something neither of them knew how to navigate. "I'm not trying to control your schedule," Ronan said, frustration evident in his voice. "I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Maribel interrupted. "And that's the problem. You keep thinking you know what I want without actually asking me. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" She crossed her arms, standing in his living room like they were in a negotiation rather than a relationship. You've spent your whole life making decisions and having people follow them, but that's not how this works. Ronan stopped, his jaw tight, and for a moment she thought he might argue further. Instead, he took a breath and nodded slowly. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. I'm still learning how to do this, how to be in something where I'm not the only one making decisions. The honesty in that statement deflated her anger immediately. I know, Maribel said, her voice softer. And I'm sorry too. I could have said something sooner instead of letting it build up. They talked it through, really talked, not just apologized and moved on. They established boundaries, expectations, the kind of infrastructure that relationships needed to function. It wasn't romantic or cinematic. It was work, but it was work worth doing. By the time autumn arrived, they'd found their rhythm. Maribel still worked at the clinic, still solved daily crises and managed the organized chaos of healthcare logistics. But now, when she left at the end of the day, she had somewhere to go that felt like more than just an apartment. Sometimes it was Ronan's house where he'd have dinner waiting. Nothing fancy, usually something simple he'd learned from a cooking video during his lunch break. Sometimes it was her place, where they'd order takeout and spend the evening on her couch, her feet in his lap while they caught up on each other's days. They attended a fundraiser for his company, Maribel in a dress that made him forget how to form complete sentences, holding his arm and charming his business partners with the same effortless confidence she brought to everything. Watching her navigate his world with such ease made him realize how seamlessly she'd integrated into every aspect of his life. She brought him to a clinic holiday party, where he met her coworkers and patiently endured their good-natured teasing about being the guy with the Audi. Dr. Patel cornered him at one point, studying him with clinical assessment. She's happy, the doctor said. Happier than I've seen her in the 3 years she's worked here. Good, Ronan replied. That's all I want. See that it stays that way, Dr. Patel added, not quite threatening but close enough. Ronan appreciated the protective instinct. Maribel deserved people who looked out for her. The shift happened on a random Tuesday in November. Maribel was working late, dealing with a scheduling disaster that involved a patient, a confused insurance company, and a piece of equipment that had been delivered to the wrong facility. By the time she resolved it, most of the staff had gone home. Her phone buzzed. Still at work? Unfortunately. Crisis mode. Need help? Need a drink and maybe a lobotomy. I can provide the first one. Come over when you're done. I'll be waiting. When she finally made it to his house an hour later, exhausted and irritated, she found him in the kitchen with ingredients spread across the counter. What's all this? She asked, dropping her bag by the door. Stress relief, he said, handing her a glass of wine. Also, I thought we could make pasta from scratch. You thought we could make pasta? At 9 o'clock at night? After the day I've had? Exactly after the day you've had. He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. When's the last time you did something just because it was fun? Maribel couldn't remember. That was the problem. So they made pasta. Badly at first, the dough refusing to cooperate, flour ending up everywhere, including in her hair. But Ronan made her laugh with his complete inability to get the consistency right. And she made him laugh by critiquing his technique with the same authority she used when fixing clinic problems. By the time they actually sat down to eat the slightly misshapen pasta at midnight, Maribel felt lighter than she had in weeks. Thank you, she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. For what? For knowing what I needed before I did. Ronan squeezed her hand gently. That's what partners do. Partners. The word settled over them comfortably, like a coat that fit perfectly. 2 weeks later, Ronan brought it up while they were grocery shopping, a domestic activity that had somehow become one of his favorite parts of the week. Move in with me, he said, examining avocados with more focus than they required. Maribel, who'd been debating between 2 brands of pasta sauce, froze. What? Move in with me. He set down the avocado, turning to face her properly. Half your stuff is already there. You spend more nights at my place than yours, and every time you leave, the house feels empty. Ronan, I know it's fast, he continued. I know we've only been together a few months, but I also know that I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build a life that isn't divided between 2 addresses. Maribel's heart was racing. This is a big step, I know, and if you're not ready, I'll wait. But I needed to ask because pretending I'm okay with the way things are would be lying, and I promised I'd always be honest with you. She looked at him, this man who'd reorganized his entire life because he didn't want to miss dinner with her, who made pasta at midnight because she needed to laugh, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "I need to think about it," she said carefully. "Take all the time you need." But as they continued shopping, navigating the aisles with their cart full of groceries for meals they'd cooked together, Maribel realized she already knew her answer. She was just scared to say it out loud. That night, lying in his bed with his arm around her, and the sound of his breathing steady in the darkness, Maribel spoke into the quiet. "Ask me again." Ronan stirred, his arm tightening around her. "Ask you what?" "To move in with you." He shifted, propping himself up to look at her in the dim light from the window. "Maribel Quinn," he said, his voice serious despite the smile tugging at his lips. "Will you move in with me? Will you bring your terrible taste in reality TV and your stress baking and your plants that I'll inevitably kill without your supervision? Will you let me wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night? Will you build a life with me that's messy and imperfect and real?" She reached up, cupping his face, feeling the familiar scratch of stubble against her palm. "Yes," she said. "To all of it. Yes." He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." The following weekend, Maribel started packing up her apartment with Grace's help. Her sister surveyed the boxes with a knowing smile. So he finally asked. He asked. "And you said yes because you're in love and he's good to you and this is what you want." "Pretty much." Grace pulled her into a hug. "I'm happy for you, Mar. Really happy. He's good people." "He is," Maribel agreed, feeling the truth of it in her bones. As she packed away her life into boxes labeled for Ronan's house, their house, she corrected herself, Maribel thought about the morning 3 months ago when she'd backed into an Audi in the rain. She thought about how annoyed she'd been, how that minor collision had felt like just another problem to solve in a day full of them. She had no idea it was the beginning of everything. On her last night in the apartment, Ronan showed up with pizza and beer. They sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, eating straight from the delivery containers, and Maribel felt overwhelmingly grateful for the randomness that had brought them together. "What are you thinking?" Ronan asked, watching her with that attentive focus she'd come to love. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that sometimes the best things in life start with mistakes." He smiled. "Best accident I ever had." "Second best," she corrected, the way she always did. "The best one is still happening." And as they sat there in the empty apartment, surrounded by the physical evidence of lives merging, both of them knew exactly what she meant. The accident was just the beginning. The choice to stay was everything that came after. 6 months later, Maribel stood in the kitchen of the house that was now unquestionably theirs. Not his, not hers, but a space they'd built together through compromise and laughter, and the kind of mundane decisions that somehow mattered more than the grand ones. She was stress baking again. Chocolate chip cookies this time, the kind her mother used to make, filling the house with warmth and the sweet smell of sugar and butter. The clinic had been chaotic all week, a systems upgrade that went sideways, staff shortages, the usual cascade of small crises that somehow always felt urgent until they were solved. But here, in this kitchen with flour on her hands and music playing softly from the speaker on the counter, everything else faded into background noise. The front door opened, and she heard Ronan's footsteps in the hallway, heavier than usual, the tired gait of someone who'd been in back-to-back meetings all day. She didn't turn around, just smiled to herself as she slid another tray into the oven. His arms came around her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice warm against her ear. "Medium rough," she replied, leaning back into him. "You?" "Long, but better now." They stood like that for a moment, swaying slightly to the music, neither of them in any hurry to move. This had become their ritual, the end-of-day decompression, the unspoken acknowledgement that whatever chaos existed outside these walls, inside them they were safe. "How many cookies are we making?" Ronan asked, surveying the kitchen counter covered in cooling racks. "All of them, apparently." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into her back. "Should I be worried?" "Only if I start making pie." "Noted." He pressed a kiss to her temple before releasing her. "I'll grab plates. We're eating cookies for dinner, right?" "Obviously." Later they sat on the back deck, a space Ronan had built last month with surprising competence and several YouTube tutorials, watching the sun set over the suburban landscape that Maribel had initially dismissed as too quiet. too removed from the city energy she was used to. She'd been wrong about that. The quiet wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was exactly what they both needed. "I got an email today," Ronan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Good email or bad email?" "Interesting email." He turned to look at her. "Johnson Enterprises wants to acquire the company." Maribel set down her cookie, giving him her full attention. "Acquire? Like buy you out?" "Essentially. They'd keep me on as CEO, maintain the current structure, but it would give us access to their distribution network, their capital, their resources." He paused. "It's a good offer. A really good offer. But it would mean less control, more oversight, a different kind of pressure." His eyes searched hers. "It would also mean more stability, better work-life balance, time to actually have a life outside of crisis management." Maribel understood what he was really asking. Not whether he should take the offer, but whether they should take it. Whether the decision was still just his to make or something they navigated together. "What do you want?" she asked. Ronan considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "A year ago, I would have said no immediately. The company was everything. My identity, my purpose, my entire life. But now," he reached for her hand, "now I have other things that matter more. Ronan, I don't want to be the reason you give up something you built." "You're not," he interrupted gently. "You're the reason I'm finally asking myself what I actually want instead of what I think I should want." He squeezed her hand. "I want mornings where I don't have to leave before you wake up. I want weekends where we can actually make plans without my phone constantly buzzing. I want to build a life with you that isn't constantly interrupted by logistics emergencies." Maribel felt emotion tighten her throat. "Then I think you already know your answer." "I do. I just wanted to talk it through with you first. Because that's what we do now. That's what we do now," she agreed, smiling through the unexpected tears. 3 weeks later, Ronan signed the papers. The transition was smoother than he'd expected. Johnson Enterprises had been acquiring companies for decades and had the process down to a science. He maintained his role, kept his team, but suddenly found himself with something he hadn't had in years. Boundaries, defined work hours, a support structure that didn't require him to solve every problem personally, space to breathe. The first Saturday he woke up without any urgent emails waiting. He found Maribel already up, sitting on the deck with coffee and a book, morning sunlight making her hair glow copper. "Hi," he said, sitting down beside her with his own mug. "Hi yourself." She set down her book. "No fires to put out?" "Not a single one." "How does it feel?" Ronan thought about it, trying to put the sensation into words. "Strange. Good. Like I'm remembering how to be a person instead of just a problem solver." "You were always a person, Ronan. You just forgot to make time for it." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I'm making time now." That afternoon, they drove to Evanston, back to the parking lot where it all started. It wasn't planned, not really. They'd been running errands and Maribel had an appointment at the clinic to drop off some paperwork. But as Ronan pulled into the parking lot, he deliberately parked in the same spot where his Audi had been that rainy Thursday morning almost a year ago. Maribel noticed immediately. "Really? You're going to be sentimental about a parking space?" "I'm sentimental about what happened in this parking space." She laughed, shaking her head. "You rear-ended me. Best decision I never made." "You didn't decide to hit my car, Ronan." "No," he agreed, turning to look at her with that focused intensity that still made her breath catch. "But I decided to get out and talk to you. I decided to ask for your number. I decided to text you that night, and the next day, and every day after that. I decided to show up at your work and tell you I couldn't stop thinking about you. I decided to reorganize my entire life because being with you mattered more than anything else." Maribel felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so good with words?" "When I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life telling you how much you mean to me. The rest of my life." The phrase hung between them, weighted with implication. "Ronan, I'm not proposing," he said quickly, though his smile suggested he'd thought about it. "Not yet. Not here. You deserve better than a parking lot where I once rear-ended you." She laughed, wiping at her eyes. "I would have said yes anyway. I know. That's why I'm waiting. Because when I ask, I want it to be perfect. Or at least our version of perfect. Our version of perfect involves minor car accidents and stress-baked cookies." "Exactly." He leaned across the console, cupping her face gently. "Our version of perfect is real and messy, and exactly what I want." She kissed him, tasting salt from her tears and the coffee they'd shared that morning. and thought about how impossible it would have seemed a year ago that a moment of carelessness could lead to this, to love, to partnership, to a life she hadn't known she was looking for until it found her. That evening, back at their house, Maribel found Ronan in his office, the space that used to be all business but now had photos of them on the walls, plants she'd insisted on, evidence of a life beyond spreadsheets and distribution chains. "Hey," she said from the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah." He looked up from his laptop, his expression soft. "Just thinking. About how random it all is. How one distracted moment, one minor collision led to everything. How easily it could have gone differently. You could have been angrier. I could have just given you my insurance information and left. We could have never seen each other again." Maribel walked over, perching on the edge of his desk. "But we didn't. You smiled at me in the rain. You made a joke. You decided I was worth the risk of being late for whatever meeting you were going to. You were absolutely worth it. Were, are, will always be." He pulled her into his lap and she went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Maribel Quinn, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even better than selling your company for millions? Infinitely better." He kissed her softly. "The company made me successful. You made me happy. There's no comparison." She rested her forehead against his, breathing him in, feeling the solid reality of him beneath her. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." And in that moment, in the home they'd built together from an accidental collision and a series of brave choices, both of them understood a fundamental truth. Desire doesn't come from planning. It arrives unexpectedly, in a parking lot, in a rainstorm, in a moment of distraction that changes everything. But desire alone isn't enough. It's the choice to stay that matters. The decision to show up, day after day, even when it's difficult. The willingness to reorganize your life, to make space, to build something that requires more than passion. It requires commitment, compromise, and the courage to be vulnerable. Maribel and Ronan had started with an accident, but they'd built a life through intention, and that made all the difference. The end. A message for you, love doesn't always arrive the way we expect it to. Sometimes it shows up in a parking lot collision, a spilled coffee, a wrong number, a missed train. The beginning rarely looks like a romance novel. It's messier, more awkward, more real. But here's what matters. When something genuine appears, disguised as an inconvenience or a mistake, will you have the courage to recognize it? Will you be brave enough to stay when it gets complicated? Will you choose to build something real instead of waiting for something perfect? Maribel and Ronan's story started with an accident, but it became a love story through choice, through showing up, through doing the work. What's your story? Have you ever had a wrong moment that turned into something right? Or are you still waiting for the perfect beginning that might never come? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.